Doesn't do have a year. We have.
So here we are. Apologies for absence is the first item on the agenda. Are we?
We received apologies for absence this morning from Jim Catalan.
Right, okay, excellent. And then disclosure of members' interests. We've started to expand that, but we all know what it means. Item 3, forward plan of cabinet decisions. Sean, do you want to?
Just going just for the chair, there's nothing new on this, that we didn't previously consider. But just to point out that we produced an abundance scheme. It's listed on the first page of the forward plan. Isn't actually a cabinet decision, and therefore won't be going through the system.
Okay. Any questions? No, Nick?
Just mentions a ledger program update on a number of occasions, but it doesn't say whether it's going to be coming to this committee or not. We did have one already, didn't we? So I would assume that the updates would come to us.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the presentation we had, I think, in the planning program. We said there was a number of works that need to be put in place and that haven't received those updates. You know, the technical nature rather than anything else, and therefore not considered necessary for this week. And that's why the committee is listed on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Frank.
You know, just from the page 2, the homeless and lost sleeping strategy from our homeland. It's on the 5th of April. Could it be requested that we do that in 2 tier? One, just to see what happened through COVID, because those policies changed through COVID, and what the new policies are post-COVID as well.
Yeah.
Would that be asked of officers when you sit right there?
I'm sure we can do that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're now at your view, Vic, and I'm swapping it around because I know all of us want to torture Greg for like 5 hours. So we're going to do the adult social care thing first because I think that's probably we've got better things to do than sit here while we torture Greg and very well want to stay here.
Okay.
So if you would like to introduce yourself and then just give us a rundown on where we are.
Thank you. I've met some of you before. My name's Alan Curry. I'm Student Manager for Commissioning and Adult Social Care. I'm here instead of Neil Bradley, who's otherwise engaged. My bit of responsibility in adult social care is particularly around the contract arrangements that we've got with external care providers. That includes the care homes that were particularly affected by the storm as well. There's an update briefing in the pack that's circulated, but I'll talk through that. The actions really from an adult social care point of view that I'm reporting and updating on today. There are 2 around data sharing and 1 around business continuity plans that we expected the care homes in particular to have. And I can talk a little bit more broadly about some of the business continuity plans as well, if that helps.
Excellent, thank you.
Just in terms of data sets, I know both adults and children's have worked on their data sets to identify and make sure we've got up-to-date records of those most vulnerable adults. Obviously, most of the people that we support through adult services are vulnerable, but within those cohorts, there are some who are more vulnerable than others, and we've got those identified. And there was further actions around how we would be able to share what is actually quite sensitive data about people's circumstances, and there were issues around sharing information with other outside agencies who shouldn't have ordinarily had access to such sensitive data. So as well as identifying the vulnerable adults list, there is a methodology now in place to share via CryptShare, which is a software that we're quite familiar with sharing information to providers with. That's operated on a day-to-day basis. That would be the methodology for sharing information to other broader partners in the event of another similar emergency. That's kind of 2 areas. The data areas were led on from a public health point of view. So that's the Director of Public Health's update. The other bit that we've been more involved with from an adult point of view is the contingency plans for particularly older persons care homes. So we got 71 care homes in Northumberland now. Several were affected by the storm. One of them in Choppington was quite significantly affected because it had a power outage for a number of days and relied on a generator for a number of days as well. Others had shorter term power outages, which were more easily managed. And since that, we've gone back to providing them to specifically address in their contingency plans what they would do in the event of a power outage. Where we can, we've encouraged those to access their own generators. Not all of them are able to. Where they've not been able to access their own generators, we've asked them to come up with alternative steps in the management of the situation where they had power outage. We've checked through those. We're happy with all but one of them, and we continue to work with that one to drag them up to speed, if I'm honest, in terms of what we would expect a response to be. The responses vary. So generators is one response. In worst case scenarios, we've got plans in place to look at things like evacuations. A number of arrangements are made between the care homes themselves so that they could share residents, have them evacuated to. We would want to see transport arrangements for those kind of scenarios. What would be the expectation around medication management? How would we make sure the right medication went to for the people out? So there's quite detailed continuity plan, business continuity plans addressing what would happen in terms of storm and storm impact on power outage. I'm aware as well that we've covered particularly older persons care homes because of the impact on them. More regularly, the domiciliary care providers that we've got in rural areas they face this kind of issue more frequently. So I'm more confident that they've got tried and tested plans as well. So adverse weather as a result of snow or wind, where people can't reach, where a care provider can't reach the service user, we're aware of business continuity plans that are in place there. They might involve the identification of people whose visits aren't actually essential to take place there and then that day. Others who it is an essential that they do get a visit, we would expect plans to cover contact with neighbours or other people in the immediate vicinity who might be able to step in and assist with medication administration, those kind of measures.
Excellent, thank you. Questions, anyone? Richard?
Yeah, disturbs me that some of them are dragging their feet over generators. Especially when I don't know if it's open to all. I mean, it's Northern Power Grid had a £7 million pot. You know, I know about 2 village halls at least that got £2,500, £4,000 to sort of make them resilient with a generator and all the correct electronics and switches that go with it. And I'm surprised that, you know, if you're in that situation, you haven't had that backup, or it isn't part and parcel of what you're supposed to have. As a care home, nursing home, stroke, whatever, everybody needs a second backup. And I just wonder if we need to go back to somewhere to say that is a minimum sort of request. That when I'm not familiar with what you need to be to have a licensed care home, stroke, whatever, but I think that needs to be looked at.
Well, I think this all highlighted the problem, Richard, didn't it? And that's what, you know, that's why we've had it as one of the recommendations, that they've got a contingency plan and the officers look at it. And if they think it'll work, then if somebody doesn't want to have a generator, but what they're saying is what we're going to do is we're going to immediately put everybody on a bus and take them somewhere else, then that's absolutely, I would imagine, absolutely acceptable. You don't have to solve, you know, the same problem in the same way. But I hear what you say. But then obviously, I would imagine the Power Grid were thinking of sort of third sector businesses, whereas, you know, oh, care homes are businesses. You know, so they're not likely to give them any data because they're pretty right.
Yeah,
But,
and for us as a council, it needs, if we are gonna come into these storms more frequently, which everybody says we are, we do need to look at this, not in this committee, but in a health committee.
So, Alan, perhaps you might just want to stick back in your mind somewhere and think, yeah, well, you know, there'll be pros and cons. I've got Nick, then I've got Gordon, then I've got Brian.
Thanks very much. You said that you were looking at evacuation plans and medication continuity plans and that sort of thing. Is that for all of the care homes, or is that just for the ones that don't have generators perhaps and don't have such solid plans for maintaining power?
So if the business continuity plan involved evacuation, we would expect them to consider things like transport arrangements, how they would get people out to a particular location, because these aren't a group of residents who are easy to move, and lots of them would be physically frail. So we'd expect a detail. If there was evacuation in a plan, we'd want to see the detail. If it was more around staying put and a generator picking up the power outage, then there wouldn't be as much emphasis on those safeguards of moving people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it basically depends on what the contingency plan says, and that's kind of.
Yeah, it's nuanced.
Yeah, which is, you know, they said, there's obviously more than one solution to the same problem, and it's up to them to do that. And, you know, I'm just pleased that we've actually, you know, brought this up and people are doing it, which is great. And I'm glad we've got a good team of people making sure it gets done.
Yeah, it's not, the storm R is just simply one possible emergency. Heavy snow would mean it's almost impossible to evacuate a home anywhere. And if their only plan is an evacuation plan, it's just not going to work. If the roads are closed, and the roads would close quite easily in rural parts. So would it not be reasonable to expect that there was some form, as Richard has said, of generator always available to cater for that kind of emergency?
I mean, it's not something they've been asked of before, and I think there would be a cost implication. I think they would come back to us and say, okay, you don't pay us enough as a council in our fees. We'd then be put under pressure in terms of a financial support in there for people who are on our contract.
So it's really
And some of them are predominantly filled by private residents who may pay a higher fee level. Probably wouldn't be an issue in those situations. Not all of them are. Some of them are on the council's contract, and you know, we get into some quite detailed fee negotiations. We'll start that again for next year's fee. I think if we were to say you have to have a generator sat there in the event of another storm, Arwen, they would say, okay, we haven't got sufficient income from your.
Just to clarify your point, another storm Arwen wasn't quite what I was saying.
Sorry, yeah.
What I was saying was there could be another kind of emergency of a similar nature. And are you saying, oh, well, we can't expect it, or we'd have to pay them more? We'll be going through the same process again. We don't have some kind of contingency plan that evacuation simply isn't an answer to. That was me only point.
But the other thing is, of course, we're not just talking about the rural areas. I would imagine most of the care homes in Northumberland and most of the people that we have placed in
Or
in the towns or the urban bit. Most of them will be. So, but you know, we can see what the point is. We're just glad that we're talking about this, and we're glad that there's, you know, we are asking them to have a plan, and we are looking at the plan and saying, yeah, we think this will work. And that's really all we can do to try and protect the elderly residents that are our responsibility, I think, really. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. I know we're talking about storm or we had numerous warnings leading up to that storm, which, you know, I don't think everybody took, you know, 100%. You know, it was just another storm, and, you know, it was a one that caught all out. The point I'm trying to make is that, you know, NCC managed very, very well, all the staff, you know, changed their rules to help residents in Northumberland, which was said from this committee, well done. But coming back to the agenda item where it says on the agenda, it's A and C, and basically it's the review of the policies. Now, Northumberland County Council will review, which we are doing now. And what I would like to leave on the table is that we leave it officers to have that yearly review of all of those care homes. And then on the other side of it is, we've got the care homes themselves. And I think they need an annual inspection and maybe advice as well. In a timely scale, you know, just so that this isn't just a one-off. In your presentation, you said that one of the fallbacks could be that we're more residents. My biggest concern is, coming back to what I said earlier about Storm Arwen, was the trigger point. Where will that trigger point be? We knew that there was a storm coming. Nobody took it seriously and we got caught. We managed it very, very well. So when would these care homes hit that trigger point to say, right, we're going to put the elderly in a bus and we're going to take them somewhere? To a place that can accommodate them and look after them and have power outreach. We are vulnerable where we are. So it's kind of sitting at trigger point. Let's put back to Gordon's point. Do we wait until the snow is 6 foot deep before we decide, look, that doesn't work? We know the snow is coming. We know it's going to be a bad point. When will that trigger point be? Because that's imperative. Thank you. That's Jen.
I could come back and comment on a couple of those if that's okay. We would expect to get out and visit all of the care homes at least once annually. Some of them we would visit many times a year, depending on the circumstances. We would do a monitoring visit. We would review business continuity plans at that visit. In terms of the point of responding, because of the the nature of the people who are into the homes, it would be an extreme response to be able to do it. So we would only do it if it was absolutely imperative to move people out, if that makes sense. The evacuation plans are useful for lots of reasons as well. You know, I take your point, it's not just about Storm Arwen, could be other adverse weather conditions. Fortunately, we've not had it in Northumberland, but there are some care homes where we've seen fires and residents have had to be moved out at quite short notice. So it's beneficial for those kind of scenarios as well to have good evacuation plans. I take the point of the need to know about trying to push for providers to have generators. We know some have looked at it closely, some have them, and some don't. We'll work harder with those that don't.
Okay, Anne?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the report. Can I just say, I think agree with what a lot of other people have said. And when I looked at this report, it is named Storm Arwen Review. Actually, it's not. It's an overall emergency review.
It was actually called Storm Arwen Review, Anne, actually.
I know, that's why I'm saying.
And
But I looked
you
at
know, this is a response to the recommendations we came out with on the Storm Arwen Review. So that's why I
understand that. What I'm saying basically is that that all homes and anybody who has any concerns about any responsibility, be our elderly people or sick people or whatever the emergency is, should all have a contingency plan in place. So it could be gas, it could be wind again, it could be snow, whatever. All of them should have something in place which you think is fit for purpose. And I think that
was the point of the recommendation.
Yeah, and I think, well, I'm sorry, I wasn't in the working group at the time. And I think actually, thank you very much for all of this, because I think it is very helpful. And I agree about the having generators, however, there is cost implications, and I can understand care homes putting it, and what we don't want to do is have the county council picking up the bill. But that's something that has to be looked at. So, and can I just agree, sorry, some of the care homes are actually in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. And that's why it's also proposed down.
That's right, so they're not all urban based, they are actually certainly in rural areas like that.
Anyway, what's your point, Anne?
I would basically making a point of saying this is an emergency, it should be across all emergency things, so whether it's gas, electricity, etc., that all of them should have contingency plan in place that actually has been looked at by the county council.
Yeah, and that was a good point, and it has.
Thank you.
Lovely, Richard.
Yeah,
And then Nick.
I'm not an expert in generators, but I've got 3.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, the number of times we've spoken about them, Richard, I've said the word, haven't we?
Well, I've got a little bit of experience in them. I've got one the size of a suitcase or a briefcase that'll power lights and a television and computer. And I've got one single cylinder diesel one at my place that it costs about 1,600 quid. And it'll power the house and an awful lot more. And at the other farm I have in Scotland, there's a bigger one, 4-cylinder diesel that cost about 4.5 grand. Now, for what these care homes charge, I'm up to date on that. I think a little bit of insurance will be far cheaper. You know, there's horses for courses. A little generator that you can buy at Machine Mart that'll power all the light bulbs in a decent sized house and maybe beyond is about 320 quid. You know, it's horses for courses, the size, you know, like if you look out here, there's one the size of a half a bus to power this building that strikes up every so often. You know, I really think we need a policy on this that really strikes to this sort of secondary emergency. Otherwise, and Gordon made the point, it's more than just a wind. If it was snow like America got, we couldn't move anybody anywhere. So I really do think we need to push the point. It's not hugely expensive. If I'm getting a village hall kitted out with a secondary power at £2,500 with a grant and another one at £4,000, it's small beer for that sort of 1 in a 10 year that's now coming every 4 years or whatever. I just think we really need to have some sort of recommendation that goes to the point of this, which is, you know, storms come in the winter when it's dark. We've had discussion, candles or people or whatever. There really needs to be something, you know, and I'm led to believe that, stand me if I'm wrong, that this county has the highest number of care home people in the country. I'm told that we have the highest number of people in, you know, care than any other county. So that's why I think it's important.
And Nick, and I hear what you're saying, Rich, we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool, thank you. I just had 3 quick questions about data. The report says that relevant data sets have been agreed, and I'm just curious, are they new data sets that have been formed from compilation of several data sets?
They are. So we've got, and I can talk clearer on the adult side of it. We've got a database that holds all of the information about the adults that we provide a social care service for, who we've assessed as having a Care Act need. From that data set, we then got a particularly vulnerable adult list, which is extracted from that. And that one, it was in existence, but when the storm came and that really tested the accuracy of the data, there were problems with it. So it's been worked on since then to make it more straightforward. It's kept up to date now. It's used on a regular basis. It's part of our own day-to-day on-call system as well. So it's shared with all of the out-of-hours on-call managers. Does that cover you?
Yeah, have you brought in any data from other departments? Any data sets from other departments within the county council? Remember there being talk of different data sets within the council that weren't identical and that could possibly be brought together.
Right. We haven't on the adult side. We're managing the adults data. We know that the providers who we contract with also, and as part of that contract, they're expected to have business continuity plans. So we would expect that their data is similarly structured as well. But in terms of us managing other council departments' data, we haven't done that.
Okay, thanks. Can I continue?
Yeah.
It mentions that CryptShare, you mentioned that CryptShare would be used to supply data with external organisations, but it does also say that you've been working on a protocol for sharing data with internal departments. What mechanism will you be using for that? Trip chat, something else? Is there a particular plan in place?
In terms of crypt share, that tends to be what we use with external ones. So all of the different companies that we contract with, we send information out to them via crypt share. Internally in the council, we would be able to share. We would expect to be able to share that not via crypt share, but it would still be secure via email.
Standard, just an ordinary email.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but with protected documents as well if it's internal in the council.
And final question was about scenario testing.
Yeah.
Was the purpose of that to check that you could identify every vulnerable person in each of the blocks which might lose power? And how did the scenario testing go?
Yeah, and I haven't got the results, so we couldn't not be able to respond on the scenario testing. As you can see, that was late on in December. I'm not sure how that went.
Could you
yeah,
share it with us when you get the information? Is that something?
Yeah, we could bring that back. And certainly we are working with the providers to get them prepared for, you know, any power outages that might happen early on in this year as well, that we hope are unlikely scenarios, but we are communicating that with providers as well. There is some risk there. We're trying to reassure people that it's a minimal risk, but equally working with them should the worst happen.
Okay, great. So the scenario testing was designed to find out whether the work you've done has been successful and you are now able to identify all the vulnerable people.
Yeah.
It's just the results that you haven't got yet.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
thanks. You're going to be shared with this one now.
Great, thanks.
Mine's just a quick one. I don't know anything about generators, right? But it would be, I think, it should be looked into further, right? Look at things like the life expectancy of a generator. I have no idea. I know Richard said they run with diesel, do they run with petrol? What else do they run with? Do they use oil? I don't know. In the grants, the apparently you mentioned there was grants for these things. It would be interesting to see if them grants would be available to privately run care homes, charitable run ones, and if there's any run by the statutory sector. And I do think that needs to have some work done on it more with regards to the generators. I think it's quite easy sometimes for them to say, oh, we can't afford this, or we don't want to go down that route, but you want to know why they don't want to go down that route. And if they're in a camp, they should have reserves for things like this. And if they can get a grant, well, they don't need to dip into that reserves as much. So I really think quite strongly on that there should be something put forward for them to actually do something in that area, not just get it as much to push people out.
Okay. All about it's a clear message from the thing.
This has gone longer than I thought it was going to actually. So thanks for your patience. I think I've got a couple of questions for you, then I'll kind of wrap it up. I think.
I don't think the multi-power grid grant is available to private sector, nor do I think it should be. I think if a private sector is running a business, it's up to them and manage their accounts to provide a level of service that we agree is acceptable. And if we don't agree, having a home without a generator is acceptable, and that's what they should have. I don't know if it needs to be a generator or whether these battery storage, solar panel, we can push that they're actually going to save in revenue over the summer by using battery storage to then cover the cost in the winter. And that also helps on the green side. And that's maybe instead of having to up our payment to them, it's something maybe so the council could support and fund and almost supplying the finance for it, not paying for it, but a payback scheme to get the solar panels and the battery storage in to ensure that they've got maybe 2 days of fallback to the point where we can remove people safely, get the roads opened up to ensure we can get them out, and it just takes the pressure off. So I don't know if it has to be a generator, it just has to be another source of power that is fit for purpose. With regards to the sharing of information, 2 points. I think it's important, like you said, about the internal departments. We must share information better with external departments, but we must share information better internally. There'll be information with like the bumbling communities together, social services, the people that, you know, is under adult social care. I thought what came out of the review was all that information was coming to one central point. So instead of me being in a response centre, having to ask 3 different departments, getting 3 different lists, potentially having the same person on 3 times, we should get one list with it prioritised, and then we can deal with that in a structure. And another comment I would like to make, it doesn't actually mention if there's 3 foot of snow. I've lost power in Wooler as an example. Once we lose power in Wooler, we lose all comms. So how does local response teams, and we were working with police, fire, mountain rescue from our centre, but actually at one point we had no way of getting the information to our centre to then check on vulnerable people. So just going forward, I think communication needs to be a bigger priority, and understand that's not exactly directly on you, but whether your department can keep pressure on resilience to ensure that there's a communication structure for us all to be able to communicate and respond appropriately.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So thanks for coming and thanks for sharing all of that. I think we kind of hear what we've said about the data sharing. We're glad that it's secure, but we need to make certain that it's available for the people who need it when it's needed. You know, not all the time, just when it gets to the emergency. That, you know, we're going to see what the note on how the trial went. And the contingency plans, I find that quite interesting that we're kind of focused down on one kind of emergency that might happen rather than all of the other things that might happen. So I am sure the contingency plans that we are asking people to have, we're going to keep an eye on that. We're going to make sure, you know, if we have another medical emergency, for instance, I'm sure there's something in these contingency plans about isolating people and all the rest of that stuff, because there should be, and I'm sure there is. And so long as we keep monitoring every year or however often we go, when we go and visit, we say, can we just see what your contingency plan is or have a chat about it? I think that's kind of what we wanted to come out of the storm Alwyn review, that it's not, oh, we did this, and 5 years later we discover that we've never asked them about it again. We just need to keep doing it. And as far as generators and the emergency power and all that concerned, if you just want to kind of tuck that away somewhere and see whether people are exploring that, and is there anything we can do to encourage them? But I don't think we can. I mean, that would just throw the whole sector up in the air if we suddenly decided that everybody had to have an alternate source of power. I mean, I just don't think that that's practical, especially when, I mean, here we are, it's 9 degrees outside. You know, I think we just need to be prepared for every emergency. But just think about the power thing and what could and couldn't happen down that. So thank you all. Thank you very much. I think I hope you enjoyed your experience, and look forward to seeing you again when Neil is busy. Thank you. Thank you. And I would say you can stay if you would like, but I know you've got better things to do. Thanks very much. You have to walk all the way around to get out.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Excellent. It's a totally.
well, here we are. We've got just about, I've had several requests from people to say, I really need to be out of here by 4 o'clock. So, Greg, you've only got about an hour and a half to be.
I said, I'll not say I've got to be gone by 23.
Yes, I said that's right.
You're just going to be slightly salty for the next hour or so. So anyway, but seriously, this is something we are all very keen on and all have a view on. And the reason we wanted to have you come and have this kind of structured chat rather than turn up with the the document and expect us to comment on it. I think we all kind of hope that there'll be a few gems come out of this. And you'll think, oh, yes, that's a paragraph or two that we can put in the strategy. And then we can feel as though we've contributed to the strategy before it's turned up. And it can be, in some of it is reflected on how we feel about what the strategy for trade and recruitment should be. Bearing in mind, we are responsible for millions and millions, literally millions of trees. So, we want to start with a statement. John?
Yeah, if that's
Great.
okay.
Yeah, absolutely. John first, is that all right?
All I'll say is that, you know, we have got a strategy, but the strategy that is currently in place is woefully out of date. Lots of things have changed. New diseases have come on the scene. We've got initiatives like the Great North Forest. We've got climate change to take into consideration and carbon footprint and the Great North Forest and all the rest of it. So there's lots of things to put in the mix.
Do you want to mention ash dieback before someone
Well,
else?
yeah, I said lots of new diseases. Ash dieback's just one of them. There's
I
also
thought you meant people diseases.
no,
tree
there's
disease.
also a lot of oak trees and things as well. So, you know, something
Yeah.
to add. But anyway,
Yeah.
I'll hand over to Greg.
And before I bring Greg in, seriously, John, please enter into the conversation as we go along. You know, don't just think, oh, well, I'm just going to listen. If you've got something to say extra, we'll be delighted to hear the contribution.
Thank you.
Greg.
Okay, well, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the invitation. It is appreciated, and it would be good to have thoughts of the committee in advance of writing the draft strategy. Now, the wider tree and woodland strategy, as John has just outlined, is a much, or reviewing it, is a much bigger operation than it has been previously. And that is because trees are far more prominent, you know, nationally, regionally, in terms of everything that's going on with climate change and all the things that John's already said. So whilst that larger piece of work is going on with quite a range of sort of internal stakeholders across the council, we reflected in neighbourhood services at the elements that we directly control and are responsible for, and felt that rather than wait for that wider strategy work to take its time, which it will take its time, that we would focus on reviewing some of the key elements within it, which you could broadly badge as sort of a tree management policy, how we actually manage our tree and woodland stock at the moment. So what our intention is to bring to this committee a tree management policy, which will form part of that wider strategy in the future. But we're long past the time when we should have reviewed, I think, the way that we respond to tree inquiries and requests to undertake work and a few other things. So with permission of the chair, I'll just outline the approach that we intend to take to that tree management policy.
Yeah.
And then take questions, suggestions once I've done that. So 3 key aspects that we'll be looking at under that tree management policy is the response to inquiries about trees. And that includes residents' requests to undertake work to trees. Our proactive tree inspections and our proactive tree maintenance. And then tree planting as the third one, but in the context of those other 2 things. So not the Great Northumberland Forest tree planting, but the kind of tree planting that we would undertake through some of the small scale grants that we've been able to get, some medium scale grants that we've been able to get, and the replacement policy. Well, if we have a tree at the moment, we replace it with 2 new ones, and looking at tree planting in that context. So the process that we'll undertake to achieve that, I'll just run through that very quickly, is we'll obviously review the current policy approach to those things. And the current resource base that we've got to undertake that work. We'll review the current performance in relation to tree management, and then have a look around sort of regionally about what the local authorities' tree and woodland policies look like now, or their tree management policies look like. We're going to review our own proactive tree inspection process. And then develop a new policy approach that hopefully will maximise the use of our resources. We'll clearly articulate to the public how requests for work will be responded to in the future. And a new policy that proportionately manages the risk of injury to the public and to property from trees. So some of the key considerations, we've obviously started those discussions internally. And some of our key considerations at the moment, and welcome new considerations from yourselves, they include, where are we currently performing well? Where are we doing well at the moment? Are there any areas of performance where we need to see some improvement? Is our current policy on responding to inquiries and requests clear and easy to understand? Is it responding to inquiries? Is our current policy responding to inquiries and requests an efficient use of our resource? So we're reviewing our resources that are available. Does our current policy allow us to use our resource efficiently? Are we currently managing risk effectively by the work that we do with proactive tree inspection? It's school child from the tree. How do we identify the potential impact of ash dieback on our highway and other diseases? That's the most prominent one. Not just on our highway network, but on our open spaces as well. What approach do we take to replanting in relation to any felling works that we do undertake? And what approach do we take to ensure that planting in urban areas is appropriate and will continue to be appropriate in the future? So that's kind of our approach and our thinking, and welcome any questions or comments on that.
Gordon and then Richard.
Just one, tree preservation orders, which come part of the planning process. And there's so often some confusion. My understanding always was that, for example, if it was a conservation area and there were trees that were not subject to TPL, nonetheless, the council commission or at least needs to be informed, the council plan department to be informed if there's a proposal to remove them. So is the TPL policy, do you think that it's actually fit for purpose, use the phrase, is that part of your study?
That's part of the wider strategy, not the piece of work that I'm looking at in the short term, but in the more medium term, that wider strategy will include colleagues from planning, from Great Northern Forest and the change team. Because how we manage our tree stock and how we look at trees as an asset and resource is split across a number of different council departments. So planning will definitely be a key stakeholder in the review of that strategy.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did bring this up. I've been banging on about this for a while. Tracking emails, I tried to send some of them on from people who are actually taking ash dieback trees down. And there's one in, like I sent it last week, someone Hexham area, and he said that they felled some ash trees that were dieback and they're just sawdust in the middle of the trees. I don't know, I haven't experienced that, but I do know it kills the tree from the inside out, so it looks all right, but it's actually not. But the problem is massive. You said we've got millions and millions of trees, we have. And the millions and millions and millions and millions comes up at Kielder. They're not the problem.
Yeah.
The problem ones are the ones that are next to the roads and power cables and BT cables and anything else. And I reckon they're about 50% of all trees on our roadsides are ash. Now, if I don't know when this next big storm comes, nobody does. But when it does come, and the longer we leave this, the bigger the problem it's going to be. And I honestly think that we should be including people like Power Grid, Open Reach, landowners, farmers, people who, because there's often a dispute on whose the tree is on the side of the road. If it's on, if it's on the fence line, whose is it? Because I'm telling you now,
Yours definitely, we don't want to pay for it. I mean, that's the approach people are taking, isn't it?
Well, all I'm saying is that it takes a lot to take a big tree down.
Yeah.
It really physically, if it was Keeler Forest, a big machine, John, you'd be aware that, you know, he goes in and just wallops them all down, puts them through some sort of, and you end up with a neat pile of straight logs or
Or a
chunks.
bookcase.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with ash dieback or ash trees, they grow all different shapes and you can't really do them with a machine other than a chainsaw and manpower. So we really are talking about a big issue. And you know, years ago, because some of these trees are 200 or 300-year old, they were planted at the side of a road, give shelter in the winter and shade in the summer to horses or what have you. And, you know, we're going to, which mentioned about replanting. I don't think we should be planting next to roads anymore. Because I think, you know, there's accidents and all that. I think that's a no-no, but that doesn't mean we say we can't plant. But, you know, I see on my road, the 696, tons of logging wagons, and I think they're going to Cramlington, where they're chipped. And they're put in the power station or whatever it is, to make electric. And it's green energy, so I'm told. But maybe we need to think outside the box to give what I'd call ash a value. Because the stuff at the side of the road is complicated because you might have to close the road to take it down. And just on my bit of road, you know, there's about 20. You know, you're talking about not just a mile, if that. But these are big, dangerous trees. You can't just get up and take it down because the way the rules are now, you can't just do that. I mean, the ones in between fields, which is still an awful lot of ash trees, there is a very short window between crops to actually take them down, take them away. So I think we need to watch this, and I think we need to speak with other people. Otherwise, one day, another storm Arwen, the number of trees is going to be double, treble, quadruple, whatever, at the sides of roads, blocking everything. And I do include the emergency services because they might have trouble getting through a lot of these roads. So I hear what you're saying, but get out there, and I have taken people out to say, because they can't really, most people couldn't tell the difference between an ash, oak, or anything. I do, and I show people that's ash, and you can see that the far bits of the tree are poking up, and in the spring or summer, they're always late to get into leaf. It's like skeleton fingers coming through where the tree is dying. And I think we need to be on high alert to get the scale of this problem under control. We never will because there's just too many.
Thanks, Richard. Before I bring Daniel in, I've got Daniel, Nick and Brian. John wants to say
Yeah,
something.
can I just respond to Richard a little bit there, because he's right, it is a very much a looming problem. You know, if you know what you're looking for, as Richard's just said there, nearly every ash tree is going to be affected, I'm afraid. You know, what they do is the green shoots out the bottom, and the tops of the trees look a bit like an antler stag, you know, that they're bare. I suppose the one sort of saviour at the moment is that, you know, one of the benefits of Storm Arwen was that anything that was at all ropey came down. So we probably have a little bit of breathing time here, but that doesn't mean to say we're not onto it. We are doing inspections. We have got work in hand at the moment. We've got a programme for going and inspecting this next year. There's a window when you can do the inspections. So, you know, rest assured we are onto it, Richard. And, you know, we haven't just buried our heads in the sand here. But it is going to be an expensive and a big problem. And, you know, there's no getting away from it.
And my question before I bring Daniel in, I'm not happy to take the answer from anybody. Does this mean that we're going to have to take every ash tree out, whether it's because does every tree not get it? I mean,
On one doesn't.
5%.
but is it worth the risk? Or leaving 5% should we just not decide to take 100% out now and start tomorrow?
The Woodland Trust estimate that 80% of all ashes would die.
And is there any way of is there any way of finding out which, sorry, Daniel,
Sorry.
Is there any way of finding out which are going to survive and which aren't?
Yeah, so well, there is, yeah, I think, in terms of, there's 4 stages of the, and they're broadly measured by the amount of canopy that's remaining. So it's been described in terms of the antlers, you know, if you've got, you know, only up to 25%, then that's in stage 4, that's in the worst stage, and the tree will fail at some point after that. Stages 1, 2, and 3, you know, ranging from 75% to 100%, you know, whatever it might be. So there's 4 different categories that are broadly measured by how much of the canopy is left intact. And in terms of then, you know, our approach, you know, what do we do next? That's something that we need to seriously consider. We don't have a ready-made answer, you know, it's not like there's millions and millions of pounds floating around and loads of people and things that can just be deployed to tackle the problem. It's got to be considered in the context of all the other council's priorities and all the other risks that there are out there. And if we do look at Storm Arwen as an example, most of the trees that came down were from coniferous plantations because, you know, they were evergreens and the sail was still there for the wind to catch.
Yeah,
I suppose one of the benefits of ash trees in stage 4 and greater condition, there's no real sort of leaves for the wind to catch hold of. I'm not saying that won't take the trees down or it won't knock a limb off or whatever, but at least with not having the leaf coverage, there's no big sail for the wind to grab hold of. We've started recording since Arwen, not before, but since Arwen, and we've done some review work over the last sort of year and a half. We've started recording the species of tree that has failed, the limbs come up down on a road, or if a tree's fallen over. So that's only in recent months we've started doing that, but we've started recording that so that we can get a sense from that of what the scale is, you know, what proportion of trees that are coming down or limbs that are falling off are ash and which proportion of other things.
Where are we with that? Can you tell us where we are?
Because we've only started in the last couple of months, so I don't have the figures.
Very, very good idea.
It'll be 50%.
Yeah,
It's
and I would try and incorporate this in the policy you're trying to.
yeah, very much so, and because we think it will be important and it will inform us, you know, how high risk is this and how much of that resource should we be deploying to it, given all the other things that the council are looking at. We did some inspections based on a methodology. We used an external company to support us. Our highways colleagues did that on the A69, just did a test road, a big one, if you like, this year. As council rules said, we can only inspect at certain times of the year because all of the trees look as if they've got no leaf canopy at this time of year. And then next year, our highways colleagues have got a number of other sort of roads planned for inspection of a similar nature. So there's the A189, the Spine Road, which is another significant road southeast of the county. Certain elements of the A68, so north of the A69, not all the entire length to the border, but key points on that route. The A689, which is sort of out Slagford Way, and then the B6524 between Belsay and Morpeth. So they're roads that the highways team are going to inspect so that they can understand the extent of ash trees on those roads and what stage those ash trees are in. So that's kind of the initial plan. And then once we've got that data next year, we can start to make some informed assessments of what we think the scale of the issue might be across the rest of the road network. We'll be doing some of the things around our open spaces, play areas, and such where we've got high footfall, country park, things like that. And the team are also exploring things like AI, artificial intelligence, to see whether, you know, there's anything we can incorporate into the normal highways inspectors cameras to see whether or not artificial intelligence can help us with some of those things in the future and cut down the cost of inspection. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking at the minute, which doesn't give us all of the answers yet, but hopefully shows that we're on a pathway to it. for that.
On this very point, on this question, rather than changing the subject.
Yeah.
I think what Richard said, what you seem to be confirming is that the majority of trees on the roadsides are ash. Is that what you're implying? If that's the case, there's more than just a safety issue about the trees coming down. There's a safety issue if there aren't any there. Because if those of us driving down the A1 today will notice that much of the tree-lined roadsides protect us from 60-mile-an-hour winds. And today there are big gusts of wind, and you would not want to be driving on major roads which weren't protected by trees in those parts. That's what they're there.
It will be different in different places.
Yeah.
Absolutely. A lot of trees are ash. That's very interesting.
Daniel.
Of the trees that were lost, Greg, when do we expect it to have a date for when these are going to be replaced?
The replanting or the replanting policy that we follow at the moment is numerically based. So although we say we'll take, once we've found a tree, we will replace it with two others. It doesn't mean that we'll replace it in the same place. So we just keep a tally every year of how many trees we've felled and how many we replant. With all of the planting schemes that have gone on for that, and things like the bypass where 30,000 were planted, we far exceed that 2 in 1 ratio, but it's not usually in the same place.
So the areas that were lost, they won't, so you're saying they won't, those spaces where the trees were, will be treated back in those spaces?
Not automatically, no. I'm not saying they wouldn't be planted in a similar location, but we wouldn't do them.
Just some woods like in New Harlem, where the lawn is, as you go down the back, there's a vast wood there that have been down, and that has lost a huge circular.
Yeah.
So the NCC teams have been in, and what they've done is they've created like a sphere shape inside the wood. It's just like a huge space, and I thought that particular spot there would do this tree planting in the same spot, but I didn't know if that was the plan or not. If like for the whole of Northumberland where spaces like that inside vast wood areas, would those spaces be replanted or just left there?
Yeah, it will depend is the answer, which isn't a very definitive answer. The priority work that we're still doing following the storm Arwen is a lot of activities work and sort of clearing stuff up that's half fallen over it. And then we're looking at specific areas. So for example, in on Lake Country Park, where there's been most of the Westwood had to be felled. We're currently looking at all the memorial sites for Queen Elizabeth memorialisation of creating, a new wooded area, some planting and perhaps something in the centre of that. So we're taking some of the bigger sites and assessing those at the moment, but we're only kind of just getting to that stage because we're still in choppy down mode. If that makes any sense.
So it'll be more like a
Now the executive term, is it?
We're still in the phase of clearing the damage and ensuring that things, the areas are safe to walk through.
but there's no, like, is there a definitive date?
No, definitely not, because we secured funding through the council's reserves to undertake emergency work in the first year. We secured further funds through the council reserves for all of the work that we've been doing this year, which is significant investment by the county council. We haven't, then moved on to what are we going to do with the spaces are left everywhere. We're just looking at a couple of the big ones.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Nick?
Thank you. Got 3 questions. The first is, I value trees particularly for the biodiversity value and the carbon sequestration potential. Are you going to be looking at those 2 things in your in the first work package, which I think was developing the management policy, or are they going to be looked at in the second work package to develop the management strategy?
Yeah, the broader strategy is where that will be considered.
Okay, so, and then returning to ash dieback, you'll be looking at that in the first work package. Are you going to be looking at presumably you will be looking at the cost implications for the council?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be huge, and obviously that's an important part of the work package.
Yeah, so the sort of approach that we take to identifying the scale of the problem is what we're doing now. Once we've got a sense on the roads that we expect this coming year, once we've got a sense of what that looks like and what we think we need to do, we can then start to push some numbers against that. And then that goes from there in the parliament, which is a process of if funds are required, which I suspect they will be.
Okay. And is it possible that, the ash dieback is such a big problem that it justifies its own strategy rather than being part of the trees and woodland strategy?
My instinct would be to say no, because you can miss the opportunity to join it up with all the work. Consider it in the context of all the other diseases, might be some opportunity, some opportunities if you did that.
Yeah, I can say that, yeah. Okay. Could I also say that, I totally follow and agree with what Richard was saying about the fact we need to find uses for the dead ash wood. But it also, dead wood has biodiversity value. So I'd like to think that a significant proportion of the dead ash trees will be left lying on the roadsides.
Yeah, I think that the cost of removing would probably mean that that is a natural thing that happens anyway, because unless the timber is easy to extract, then it costs us money to have it taken away. We can get a value for timber that's easy to extract. We can naturally charge money for that. Or in some cases where it's kind of easy in some places and a bit more difficult in others, we can just get it taken away for free. But where it is difficult to extract timber, then it costs us money. So our default would be to leave it in situ.
I think that's one that we'll have to further discuss really, because the one thing about ash is it will burn whether it's green or seasoned. So there is a value to people for fuel. I would question, the safety issues of leaving trunks of trees lying on the roadside. I think we might get into troubled waters there with claims. So I think that's something that we need to have further discussion about before we certainly put it in any policy. On Nick's point about, should we treat ash as a separate one, I would agree we shouldn't, particularly because, there is this oak problem as well, which hasn't got this far north yet. Touch wood, so to speak. But there's another one. There's a one with your conker trees. There's loads of chestnut trees dying as well, and so I wouldn't have a specific policy for a specific species. I think we want it as a policy overall.
Yeah.
Could I come back on that?
One more come back, yeah.
Yeah, just a brief one. Why did they used to leave the trees lying on the roadside?
Because somebody might run into them and have an accident.
Yeah, I don't think Nick means literally by the roadside. He means kind of where it's felled, rather than.
You couldn't leave it on private land, could you, without permission? So you would have got over the village.
It's no more dangerous than not much more dangerous than a stone wall.
But if it's private land, we won't be felling it, will we?
Well, you shouldn't, but you might have some agreement, because if it's on private land, it's going to fall onto the road.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I think it was mentioned before about power lines. Well, National Power Grid do come and chop trees down along the line of our power lines for their own peace of mind in any case.
Yeah.
And they've got the right to do that.
But the other thing, before I bring Anne in, I understand that it kills trees, but I don't know whether it's an insect or a fungus or whatever. But surely, if it's consuming the tree and you take it away and a bit falls off, then you're just going to contaminate somewhere else. So the whole thing needs to be, you know what I mean? We just need a serious think about, leave some of them where it's appropriate, destroy on site, whatever is the safest, most environmentally friendly way of disposing of it is what we should do in every individual case. I don't think it should just be, well, every tree we're going to send to cram it in the burn. Some will have to be left, some will have to be, it's back to every solution can have, the same problem can have many solutions. Anne.
Thank you. First of all, can I just say thank you for cutting back all our ash dieback in the village. Right, we've been doing it for a long time now. But it has worked, and unfortunately it is spreading along the valley. As you said, so it's in one village at the moment and it spreads. So it will be, we know that, and it's, but thank you, and you are continuing to cut back. They are on your land, and you actually leave them, and they just appear within minutes. But thank you for that, because it has got, must be 5-6 years that you've been cutting them back, watching and cutting them back, so thank you for that. Can I just go on about policies? Could I make sure that when you put policy in about actually those people who are qualified to give advice on ash dieback or other trees that are unsafe, and that could be TPOs, that there is a proficient person who is doing that, and I'm not saying that is your, then because you're the ones who deal with that are highly qualified. It's other people who give advice outside of your officers. And I think you need to be careful about that. We've had a lot of problems about that with Storm Arwen in particular. And advice didn't stand up and caused a lot of problems, cost a lot of money. So it is your, hopefully I was going to say, it's your responsibility to ensure that all advice is properly monitored and quality people are qualified to give that advice. The other one is writing of the policies, great, and I welcome all policies. However, could we have policies that actually is supported by resources? Because we have finite resources. I mean, in my area, I know how many people you've got, and they've been cut back and cut back. There's not an army of people there to come and cut trees down or do anything like that. What I would hate to think is that actually a policies in place where everybody says, oh, they'll come and do it, they'll do it. When you've got years and years of work to do, because you haven't got enough resources in place. And I think that's when we're talking about ash dieback or any of the others, it has to be managed appropriately according to the resources we have available to do it. And that's, those are council-owned trees. I'm not talking about other ones. So that was about the use of resources, because I do feel, I think the men do an excellent job. Not many of them, very few. If you want to ask how many work in your area on them, very few. And they do a fabulous job, the amount of people there. And the other one is about trees on highways. I'm talking about not your trees overhanging trees, I'm talking about trees that actually sit on the highway or stick out onto the highway. And if you want to hit a tree, it's much more dangerous than hitting a brick wall or stone wall, because they just give in. And unfortunately, I've got trees that need looking at, because actually people have died hitting them. And I think that they should, as soon as that happens, there should be a policy in place that people look at that tree, why it's there, and why, it, you know, it's having a tree sitting out. I know there were quite a lot, it's the B6309, and I'm quite happy to work. I don't know if I go to highways with this, they know about the depth, obviously, but or come to you and to ensure that the trees are properly removed. So that's, I don't know whether you share that policy with highways, or it's yours, it's your tree though.
Yeah, we work very closely with highways because the highway trees, you know, the things that people talk about. What you're proposing in terms of if a car has had an accident with any object in the verge, you wouldn't normally remove that object, whether it be a tree or a wall. I'm not sure if that would be.
No, mine is about trees that are actually sticking into the highway. The stump is in the highway, not in the verge, but actually in the highway. It sticks out. And you know, basically, if you're going down, say it's a 60-mile-an-hour area, and the tree is there, and you've got a wagon there, you hit a tree. I'd go for the tree before I go for the wagon. But what I'm saying is that you need to have a look at these more carefully. John, I'm quite happy you can come and have a look. I can show you where to look down and everything else.
I'm quite concerned, Anne, if you're saying we've got tree stumps sticking onto the.
No, they're not stumps, they're actual trees themselves.
Yeah, I've seen them. Yeah.
You've seen them. I've seen them. I see them all the day, every day. They actually stick out.
Identify them and.
Well, the nose are there. So let me have a word with, you know, you can come and have a look, John. I'll drive you there.
The highways team would be the first port of call for any obstacles.
Yeah, what I'm trying to do then is, can you relate that to the policy? I don't know how you relate that to the policy, because you're talking about ash dieback, but that's not ash dieback. This is not a massive tree. there's a few of them, but actually there should be a policy between the highways, removal of trees against ash dieback.
I would hope, and you're obviously alluding to this isn't the case, but I would hope that the routine highways inspections that take place would lead a highways inspector to identify anything that's a hazard to highway users and that they would, deal with that hazard.
Well, I've been there for donks actually. It's just when somebody actually dies, then it suddenly becomes a bigger issue. Otherwise, you'd be taking down a lot of trees because these are actually sticking on the highway. There's a difference between being on the highway and I dash back and those actually coming out of the highway.
That speaks fully to the highways.
Well, but that would need to be something in a policy somewhere that said if that's discovered.
Yeah.
It's Brian next, but just to come on from that. Should there be something about if there's a fatal act, regardless of where there's regardless of where the person, whether they leave the road or whatever and they hit a tree, do we have anything that says that we go and make sure the tree's all right, or if it's in a dangerous place, we take it down? Is that a policy that we've ever had, or?
I wouldn't know without speaking to our highways colleagues because they investigate accidents on the highway and any damage to the highways infrastructure. But I think that's a good suggestion to talk to highways colleagues about, and if that isn't the case.
Yeah, but a little paragraph in that says in the case of a road accident or a collision, the tree will automatically be inspected. And if it needs to come down, it will be taken down.
Chair, I think you'll find that there's a number of trees that have been responsible for a number of accidents in the wrong place. You wouldn't put trees around the corners of Formula One tracks.
No, you wouldn't.
It's exactly the same situation.
So we just need to, and obviously replanting will never take place.
Still. Depends with the trees, they are standing still now.
Yeah.
So to blame them for the accident.
Yeah, can I just say, it's not, as if there's any lighting, it's totally dark and all kinds of things happen, but and a lot of people don't know all the roads, that's the
But
problem.
I think Councillor Dale has helped us identify a point about what happens when there's a vehicle that's hit a tree. Do we inspect the tree? If we don't, it should be in the policy you're developing now, should automatically be inspected by a qualified person. And if that person thinks it's damaged and it should come down, that's what happens.
May I assist you here, Chair?
Of course you can.
It is the case, if there is a fatality, there most certainly is a recommendation about the reasons comes out always, no exceptions. I can think of the road near me where the 50 limit was put as a direct result of a fatality on a particular corner. And that came out of the actual accident. There will always be a recommendation comes out of a fatality as to what the component parts of the fatality were. A collision, no. That collision may not even be reported. If you damaged your car, you probably won't bother reporting it. So I think that you'll find there is a distinction because we deliberately plant trees on roads, as I say, for protection.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly, it may be that if there's never a recommendation about the thing that caused it, the car comes off the road, hits a tree, there is an investigation about the road was slippery, la-di-da-di-da, but is there anything ever mentioned about the trees? I think probably we should have something that says we go around and make sure that the tree's all right. And if it needs to come down, then it does. Or if it contributed to the accident in some way, then something needs to be done about it. I think that's quite a sensible thing to do.
Can I just add that on to that one, is that I think the basic thing is most of them are on the rural roads where there's speed. And it's the speed and the actual physical tree sitting there and dark, no lights, no centre lamp, everything else. And actually, maybe over a period of time, people could look at these trees and have a look. They're probably worth taking down because they're enormous. They're worth something. But I think maybe you could talk to some councillors and they'll go to tell you. I'm not asking it's your job, but it should be a policy somewhere within the council.
Yeah, I think while we're sort of developing the policy and we're developing the strategy, I'd urge any member who thinks that there is a tree that is dangerous that's sticking out over a road to report that to the highways team and certainly.
Better policy then.
Brian, sorry to have kept you waiting so long, but I knew this was going to take an age.
No problem, Chair. Thank you very, very much. Just want to touch on a few things. And we've talked, I'm just going off what members have said. We've been mindful of going back and having these conversations probably about 2 or 3 years ago. We knew how far behind you were with your programs then, with your reduced budgets and reduced manpower. So to put this additional burden on you of storms, 3 diseases is an extra burden. So, you know, well done to you doing what you can on limited services, but people have to be aware of that. When this came to scrutiny the last time, sadly, there was a young girl died in a school. And ironically, it's front page pages today again. And, you know, we are talking about trees. And one of the recommendations that I asked at that particular time was that all school and pedestrian routes, urban areas, would be looked at and maintained. And I just hope that that's still the policy now, or the new policy that of a few years ago. In the presentation, I'm casting my mind back. We brought it up, and I think it was Eileen Carty that brought it up about 2-for-1 replacement tree plan. And I think at the time you didn't say that that was the policy anymore. It was a 1-for-1. So it's reassuring that it's 2-for-1 now. The other thing that Richard has brought up is land ownership. We have to identify the ownership of land. We also need to identify the ownership of responsibility for those trees. It's a shared responsibility, and the landowner has to understand that if that tree goes over and, dare I say, hurts somebody, that they're responsible for it and make them aware of it. I can only go off areas in my ward that I know. The street, we'll put a new set of street lights around full of Northumberland to save money for energy costs to the county. They've been very, very successful. But the problem is we've got trees that are around there that need maintaining on a regular basis. Now, dark nights, rainy nights, we've got directional light that doesn't get through onto the main road. The reality is that's an issue and a problem in itself on main routes and towns. Richard suggested that, you know, that around about removing trees at harvesting time. But the problem is, we're stuck with a timetable, you know, there's certain times you can take these trees down when the birds aren't nesting.
If they're dangerous, you can take them down any time.
Right. So it's the thing that's who identifies if it's dangerous. And the reason why I'm saying that is I'm respecting the nesting seasons, but I'm also respecting the harvesting season, which really reduces the time of you and your gangs to get in there and do what you've got to do. So we have to get, coming on to Andy's point, policies around this and strong policies. The one thing that hasn't been mentioned, and I'm having issues on the River Warnspec at the moment, are trees falling into the Warnspec. The Warnspec and all our rivers around Northumberland will be silting up, blocking up. So on the back of that, I think we should get a policy, a plan and some equipment to remove trees in partnership with the river authorities and with partnership with the owners of lands beside there to remove and get some equipment to remove those trees. The River Warnspec, and I know the River Blythe has got big issues in respect of silt. And we're trying to address that as best we can. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've got Gordon, I've got Councillor Castle, I've got, was that your intention?
I made the point.
Okay, Councillor Dale, Councillor Green, Councillor Dawn. Councillor Green, Councillor. Wow. Right, I stick the first names usually.
Yeah, all right, can I just add to that? Thank you. One of the things we've got in our housing estates and all over are routes, streets, pavements, higgledy-piggledy And actually, what we need to do is ensure that planning policies in place which say, when you're putting trees down, where they can go. I have people who suddenly said oh, can we just pop one at the edge of the verge? And I just said, no. I have asked the officer that as well. No, but also we can't have indiscriminate planting of trees anywhere near where there's going to be pedestrian, never mind roads, but actually pavements. And we've got landed up with, I've got pavements which are horrendous, beautiful trees, can't walk on the pavement. And all that, I mean, we're talking about taking into consideration 10, 20, 30 years time when it'll hit everybody if you don't do something about it now. So we need to look at the landscaping in future, and that needs to go into planning and whatever, because it's not just the height, it's actually what it does to the pavements and the infrastructure for those.
If I can get to touch on that as a response, Chair, very quickly, a good example of what the council are doing now when it's looking at street trees anywhere is considering issues exactly like that. And if you look at Bow Street in Blythe, where we're doing the Northern Gateway Phase 1 project there, the tree roots pits, I mean, what they're called now, but they're planted in specialist containers, for the want of a better word. So you've got tree root pits that should prevent those roots from ever coming up to pavement level and creating uneven pavements.
20, 30 years time?
Yeah, it's designed for the life of the tree. So you know, those tree pits or those root pits are, you know, included in the design of any sort of highway trees from a highways point of view now, because we know that's been an issue in the past.
And I think that should be with people, every landowner should take observation of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just going to bring Eileen in and then
It's just to come on Anne and just to come on to Brian, in the national parks, we've got a policy where you right tree in the right place.
Yeah.
I think we should carbon copy that and have the right tree in the right place. I really feel quite strongly about that one.
Yeah, I think to be honest, most of us do. I mean, I bang on it, planning all the time about, because I've got trees in the avenues in my division that are bigger than the house, and as Anne says that, you know, you cannot walk straight down the street because the curbs are up and I put flex down and that doesn't work. So I think there's a kind of a two-pronged thing here. We've got to be mindful of what we've done in the past and manage that and try to make certain that what we do from now on, we learn from what, you know, and remember these things are going to be here long after.
Yeah, and
long after me anyway.
I quite agree, Chair, and quite agree with Councillor Dale, particularly about the roots and how, you know, these plants are enormously powerful. And, you know, I would actually question whether these so-called pits that they're going to plant them in will actually stop the roots getting out, because, you know, you see even small plants, never mind trees, you see small plants pushing away through tarmac and the cracks in cement and whatnot.
You know, always find a way.
I don't like the way that we actually plant trees on road improvements near the road verge. We should keep them well back from the road verge. And, you know, because we don't do as much grass cutting for environmental and cost reasons, the self-seeding, the whips come up all the time. So, you know, I'm personally against planting near new roads.
Well, you see, consensus reigns. Nick.
I'm not sure. Slightly disagree. Or at least question your suggestion that after every accident where a car's hit a tree on the verge, the tree's inspected. I think when a tree is encroaching on the road itself, then it needs to be identified and dealt with. But I think if the car's hit a tree on the verge, I mean, yes, fair enough, inspect it to check whether the tree has become dangerous as it's not to being hit, but don't blame the tree.
No.
Thank you for pointing out that the trees don't.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sorry if I didn't make myself clear. What I mean is, if there is a collision, then our expert needs to go out and say, well done, you survived. You know, and if if it needs to be protected in some way, do that.
Okay.
Yeah, but obviously if it's got a massive crack in it, then we're going to have to do something about it. It just needs to be looked at.
Jeff, I think you could do the initial inspection, you don't need experts.
They told him planted this tree so his troops could walk in the shade.
Yeah.
You remember along the road?
I've got Richard and then I've got Brian.
I've made, considering we're at policy formation, point or trying to adjust the policy
Yeah,
for today, you know, this,
Yeah.
what's coming down the line. The science, what's been said about, you know, leaving big trunks outside the road or whatever, the science might tell us what to do with ash trees, because it might say you have to burn them.
It's full.
You know, otherwise it's just gonna sit and push out
yeah.
more stuff.
Or whatever. it
Yeah,
is.
so the science will tell us that one. On my bit of land, there's about 30 mature trees. This is roadside trees. There's only one looks resilient, and that stayed in leaf or in green leaf for a long time. So if I have to take them all down, I might leave that one. But for an example on size, my farm's about 300 acres, the one here. There's about 30 acres of woodland. And I reckon there's about 300 ash trees in all of that. So that is the scale, and about 50% of those are mature and 50% are saplings, which are small chainsaw stuff. But the rest are the size of this table, trunk-wise, if not beyond. We also have something coming down the line after this, which is, we're talking about mature trees. In all the hedges, there will be a percentage of ash trees that we don't really see. You know, so you see some wonderful looking hedges that's all been primarily cut by the farmer, the landowner, whoever. There will be a percentage, and I don't know what it is. I'll try and do a little survey of what's in that. The percentage of those will be ash that will still be dying and need to be taken out and replanted. That's after this is all sorted, hopefully. And ash is a prolific. It's even called a weed. It really does grow, and we've got bits of old road. I go to, say, next to the Wagon or former Wagon Inn. There's a bit of road that's been the A696, and further up where it's been widened, it's just full of ash trees that are not part of anybody's lands. They're part from us, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of places like that. That's not on the highway, but they're not in the farmer's field. They're on our land, and that, you know, there is sapling, if not beyond size. So, you know, I welcome everything that is coming, but, you know, this is just the start. We do have other things that are going to come with this. We need to get the science right of what to do with this stuff. We really are talking, probably in this county, in the region of 2 or 3 or 4 million trees.
Okay.
And even if we took everybody that's working in Keeler, it would take 10 years to shift them up.
More than that,
Probably.
a lot more.
Mark, did you wish to contribute at all?
Just, policies needed.
Yeah.
I really, push this thing storm over, a clear policy for an authority, clear policy for landowners. And it needs, I think what was said in the pre-meeting is something that we did as a parish council a few years ago, is what can we do and what can't we do? And be as clear about the things that we can't do as what we can do. So members of the public, landowners know exactly where we stand, because I've seen the amount of work that you guys had to pick up after Storm Arwen, and I bet over 50% of it wasn't your responsibility if we're look at it case by case. So I think the council has to be commended on the speed and how quick they did get on and get highways open, but actually probably wasn't supposed to be our cost, but it was necessity. Please keep in mind the use of the wood. I think that's really important. We can't be wasting any revenue. If it can be sold and reused, we need to get that revenue back in. We need to be looking at how it can be used, like you were saying, for degenerate, for environment, and also log banks in rural areas. Can the council support log banks for fuel poverty? You did after Storm Arwen, which was greatly appreciated in north of the county, but that's something that I don't know whether it would come into policy, but it's something just to keep in back in mind. But I do think that it's good that you're looking at the policy again. This is the time where some huge pressure is coming. If we need a clear policy going forward and where we stand.
Thanks, Chair. Before I bring Brian back in, then from what you just said there, perhaps, Greg, there needs to be something in the policy about once the thing is felled, these are the things that we will do with it. Log banks, you know, if it can be turned into furniture, and you know what I mean?
It can't be, I've asked that question.
Any tree we're talking about.
No, I'm talking about ash.
No, well,
Ash can't go into furniture.
No, sorry. I'm being too specific. What I'm saying is, following on from what Mark says, if we're talking about developing policy, then something about what do we do with the felled item, whatever it is, it's oak or whatever. Do we leave, you know, in certain circumstances, we will leave it. In other circumstances, in the north, you know, there'll be a log bank within 3 miles of, you know what I mean? Just kind of, rather than just say we're going to take it down, you know, if you may decide that the best thing to do is chip everything. Well, if that's the case, then put it in the, you know, our preferred way of disposal is chip it back onto the land it came out of.
It could be as simple as a percentage thing, Chair, that we would aim to do 2% to a charity, you know, for fuel poverty, a percentage, you know, and then the rest to be sold to try and incur cost.
So can you get something out of that, Greg?
Yeah,
You know what we're trying to.
in my head, that is already looking at kind of almost like a priority list of things for the person on the ground to consider, because what we do with the wood will depend on a range of different factors that will have to be assessed by a human being. So if we can set them a criteria in terms of these are the, you know, that's the ideal outcome if we can, but give them almost a tick list of things to think about before they make their decision. That's
Brilliant.
That would be the word contractors into it as well.
Yeah, well.
Because a lot of the work is done by contractors. In my.
at the moment, it's,
Yeah.
But anyone employed in this by the county council would. Oh, would, very good. Brian and Nick.
Just very, very quickly, I think Anne touched on it there, that we'll have to be, take her up with the work with private sector about the trees and, highlight the policies to farmers. You mentioned about trees now being planted very close to the highways. The new Morton bypass for me, it's not my guru, but the thing is the trees there seem to be very close to the road. There'll be a problem on our lifetime, like what Jeff said, but even if you go along and you think, well, actually, they're only 3-4 yards off the road, it will be a problem. And coming back to the roots that John had said, I've got a resident in my ward who the roots, the tree is in our area, we're responsible for it, but the roots are going down. The roots are getting themselves around the gas pipe or the water pipes or whatever, some sort of a pipe work. And the only answer back to the resident was, well, make sure you're insured for it. So we need a clear indication as that root goes down into private property and causes an issue of subsidence or with the gas, the water mains, anything that's under there. Who is responsible? We have to get that clear policy as well. Because I found that strange that an officer said that to somebody in the
Well, just answer for Greg, I don't find that strange at all. Some of the things that my residents have said that they were told by officers are far more bizarre than that.
The officer, he said he did, so.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, I'm sure, but I think straight talking sometimes, people don't expect council officers to be straight talking as some of our people are. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
what actually officers should say in that circumstance is that you should contact your insurers if you think that council tree is damaging your property. You should contact your insurers and then get them to contact the council's insurers.
Illegal.
Because that becomes illegal,
And
or not, we're causing damage.
And I'm not sure how, you know, this, I think we very definitely need to have this in 2 bits. What has happened, what we've inherited, what's been going on, and what we intend to do
forward.
Now, as you say, we are not going, we are not going to plant trees next to roads unless there's 4 meters or whatever it is.
Yeah, but yeah, the reason why I brought that up, it's an additional cost or an additional request to your house insurance. So that
Yeah.
it's not just a standard policy, so that has to be added to your house insurance. So what happens to the old dear that hasn't got that, you know, she's got a house insurance, thinks everything's covered, but then this route becomes a problem, and who's gonna fix it then?
The householders insurers could then put a claim against the council's insurers to cover the cost of any repairs, and that's kind of the way that would work in that situation.
There was, there used to
Wouldn't
be
be
a.
a liability, just don't do the work, because,
Yeah.
subsidies could be for a range of different.
There used to be a massive, every time it rained in one of my avenues, there used to be a massive pool of water by the drain.
That's like out here.
Yeah, and it went on for ages and ages and ages, and what they discovered in the end was that many years ago, the drainage pipe had cracked and the roots of the tree had got in there, and it was just sitting there saying, well, this is the tree. It was literally, the root was the size of the pipe. You know, so we definitely need to be thinking about this in two halves. What's gone on in the past, how we manage all of that, and how we make certain we don't make the same mistakes again by planting trees that you know are going to be 80, 90 feet high next to a 25-foot house. I mean, what were they thinking? Well, what they were thinking is, oh, we've got a load of ash trees. Let's just, because it looked great, you know, so we need some kind of vision about what's this going to look like in 50 years.
As if you need a landscape architect.
Preaching now.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you could give us a rough idea of the timeline for the development of the tree management policy and strategy.
No, the tree management policy, will be done much quicker than the wider strategy. So the tree management, drafting a tree management policy to cover these issues, should be done within the next couple of months.
And hopefully anything that you feel has always been useful here,
Yeah.
you'll put in that, and then we'll get the written draft.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll be able to identify some of the things.
So I think Sean will tell everyone we're due to bring that policy or that update to sort of March or April scrutiny.
Yeah.
If you can just give me perhaps a little bit of additional time to consider some of the suggestions you've made. And we perhaps bring that in May or June, if that's okay.
Can I make a couple of suggestions and then we'll just wrap it up and then everybody will be happy. Go on, Nick.
I was just hoping you might be able to give us a rough idea of the timeline for the strategy as well.
Not today, but we can provide that as an update.
Is that you're not going to tell us what the strategy is today, or you can't give us a date for when the strategy?
I can't give you a date because I'm not in complete control of the rights of it.
Right, so do you think there's any merit at all in having a really well thought out, dramatic ash dieback policy, and then going to the government and saying, you know, this is a massive problem, not just for us, but here is a way that we think the council could manage it, and all you would have to do is give us an extra 20 million quid, and we will spend it. We will, you know, we will prove that this will work everywhere. Do you think there's some mileage in trying to get some, you know, specifically? First of all, what we're going to do is we're going to identify all the trees we think are going to need to come down. Then we're going to identify a way of getting them down. And then we're going to identify what we're going to do with the product. So, you know, it kind of having a thing that we can get extra money for because it's so well thought out.
Could I request that you ask me that question once we've done this initial Batch inspections.
Yeah, if I remember it, only just occurred.
So, I'm sure, there'll be every council, most councils in the country would like to try and load the government for a small program. But in actual fact, one or two have actually raised their balances and actually committed many millions of pounds to hashtag that problem already. We are not jumping in with both feet here. We're gonna do the work, do the research, do these surveys, and then try and give you measured responses to what we think the scale of the problem.
Yeah,
be.
I get that, John, but what I'm saying is, if you do a whole plan that's in,
Yeah,
and then say, yeah, no, but everybody else is going this scattergun approach. We've actually got this whole chain of stuff that we would like to try. And we would like you to help us deliver it, because if it works, then every other council can look at this and think, oh, yeah, well, yeah, actually, we've been going at it piecemeal when Northumberland had created a chain of things that were possible to do. You know, it may be one way of getting money out of them. And just something else I just wanted you to think about. You know, we are planting 150,000 whips or whatever. So basically what we're doing, if we're not careful, is we're just creating another 150,000 problems in 25 or 30 years' time. So can we just, when you're developing this policy, can we just really think, put yourself in the place of the tree rather than in the place of the human that's going to be gone when it's still going? And can we just have a whole plan for how we're going to deal with all of these extra trees that we've planted? Because I'm not sure, I think you said before, there's kind of like a 5-year maintenance worth of it. But we've got ourselves, the old Northumberland has got itself in the place it's got in, is because people have just left them and haven't managed them properly. So if we haven't got a proper management plan for these 150,000 whips in 30 years' time, people are going to be sitting around here saying, what were those people doing? Planting all those trees there. So
the tree going out.
Might not be here in 20, 30 years.
Well, that certainly won't be. The point is the trees will be. And we just, can we have a thing that thinks about the whole life of the tree? Rather than the government saying, oh, plant as many trees as you like. You know, maybe they said 50 years ago, ash is brilliant, it grows quickly, you cannot kill it, get as many ash trees out there as you can, because it all, you know, it's all part of the biodiversity of the place. And here we are 50 years later and they're dying on us. So can we just think when you're doing the policy, can we just think about how we might actually manage the tree throughout its whole life, or manage the land that it's on?
I would hope policy would articulate the approach that we do take nowadays, and that we don't consider every planting unless we think it's appropriate and maintainable to the longer term. You know, we would never want to end up in a situation, obviously, where we were fearful of planting trees in case we couldn't manage them, in case the disease came along. But certainly the policy will reflect the considerations that my team already undertake when they're designing a planting scheme.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to get you and your team just to think slightly out of the box, because no one thought that 50 years ago we were going to have a disease that was going to take out ash trees. So we planted them everywhere. And I'm not saying you've got to sit there and think, oh, well, we better not plant any cherries because in 25 years' time, they're all going to, but just be aware there needs to be diversity. And we need to have a plan. When we're planting trees, we need to have a plan for the life of that wood.
I went to school, Jeff, there was a scheme that said plant a tree in 73.
Yeah.
That's 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't, can anyone else remember plant a tree in 73?
I do, yeah, yes.
Well, there's a new card on the
Plant some
table.
more in 74.
New card on the table, we should look at some point of running chainsaw courses.
Well, yeah, we should make, sorry, go on.
See exactly where you're coming from, but ash trees are common on roadsides because they self-seed
Yeah,
very
yes.
successfully, and because the roadsides aren't cutting them, not because anyone decided that it was a good thing to put in there.
Yeah, but the avenues, anyway.
But I see where you're coming from.
But the point being then, if that's the case, then we should actually have somebody go and prove the verges, taking out all of the ash waste. All I'm saying is that this needs to be a whole holistic thing, and we're talking about the strategy now rather than these policies. But strategy in the end comes down to policies. I just would like, I've really appreciated this conversation, and I've learned stuff myself. And I just think we just need to be a bit more, not open-minded exactly, but a bit more willing to see the landscape in past our lifetimes. You know, and if people had known who planted those trees in the avenue, if they'd known that the trouble that they were going to cause and the cost of their investment, they would have planted cherries, or they would have planted poplars. They wouldn't have just, you know, whatever they could find. Then obviously we need to be concentrating on native trees. And on the other thing, of course, is with climate change, you might have native trees. Britain might change. You know, you might actually have to have poplars instead of.
Hearts of ash instead of hearts of oak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, that's me being preachy, I apologise.
Yep, whenever I hear the word strategy, I know it's gonna happen. When I hear the listing, I know nothing's gonna happen.
As long as the resources are there
Well,
to take the policies forward,
Yeah.
that's my main.
Councillor Dale is absolutely right, and I think we haven't even touched on that.
Mhm.
What we're talking about, just about that ash dieback, is millions and millions of pounds, and that's why I'm saying have something that you can, something innovative that you can take the government and say, we think this will help solve the problem, but you're going to have to pay for it.
Woohoo.
So, because, you know, we haven't got enough people to manage what we've got. And that's why there's still trees lying in verges, and we'll never get to them. But I haven't got the resource. Sorry. Right, I've off my soapbox, you'll be glad to hear. Sean, I think item 5 is you, is it again?
Yeah, the next meeting is the 8th of February, we've got 2 items, the 106 annual report and the report on the carefactors. And March, I take Greg's request, definitely will be before June, definitely.
Yeah, I think June would be a better time. We've got a lot of things to think about.
Yeah, yeah, and the work programme is full until then anyway, so you will.
Okay, if you would, I'll bring you in a sec, Brian, as you go along, if you think there's something you can share with us while you're preparing this, then it'd be all right to email us, won't it? And, you know, the committee can see it, and if you wanted to comment, if you think that would be helpful, I don't want to be hectoring you anymore, but if you think it would be helpful to, you know, express your thinking in an email, then, you know, you might get some helpful reply. Brian?
Just coming back to the 8th of February meeting around the 106 agreements. I know most people around the table, all elected councillors are on a global planning committee. Not everybody's on the strategic planning. So what I would like to see is that maybe we can have some filter back or some feedback from the chairs of planning to give more information to give their experience of 106 agreements.
Do you want to speak at a committee, you know, Brian?
Sorry?
If you want to speak, you always just have to ask. You don't need to be teeing it up like this.
No. At the end of this, it's, you're better off having all the information, all the feedback from all of the chairs, because this will probably be a one-off, not to come back to for 2 years. So,
This is the annual report, you had this from last year.
yeah, but why can't we have a little bit of feedback of the positives and the negatives of what we went through over the last, well, since this council anyway? Because we have got a lot of new councillors on board.
So what
I don't think everybody understands the process and the route of 106.
So I don't think this report is that, without this report, actually deals with how the arrangements for the 106s and how the money has been allocated, rather than the process, the application process of 106s.
So would it be
So
possible?
that's probably an issue, we should probably go with the committees from this.
Well, for a year and a half now, it's on record that I've been asking for training, updates, and everything, and we're still struggling to get.
So
And these are for new members, but
So at some point, Sean, could you have somebody come in, well, obviously not on that, because it's a different thing, but somewhere else, 106 and where it comes from and what it's used for and where, how the policies written and all of that, is that possible?
I'll raise it with the officers who are preparing this report. And I'll ask them whether or not it's appropriate to provide that information at that plan meeting. Or whether
the reason why I bring it up is the 106 route takes two different routes. If it's a 106 agreement and a local planning, it takes it from everybody knows. If you're not on strategic and there's a 106 agreement, it takes another route. And not everybody knows what those routes are, unless they cross themselves.
That's a training issue and a scrutiny issue, or I shall take that up elsewhere for you.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Dear.
So can I just say to you that this, and I have to look, is that the government seems to have changed 106 funding for schools, infrastructure for application. That might have some knockback from council, but can you check that one? Because it just came through over the Christmas period. Somebody sent it to me, saying, and you know about it.
But in any event, you have the officer at the next meeting. So if there are issues you want to raise in connection with one of those fixes, you can certainly have the opportunity to do it that day. And if it requires any further work, further training by each meeting, we can.
But that's fine, whatever you like, as long as it's a happy now.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Greg, for coming and indulging us. I'll let you feel that it was worthwhile and something can, you know, get your creative juices going. If you need our help in any way, just ask for it. If you would like to email us, that's fantastic. And thanks for coming, John. Really appreciate it. Turning up. So, the last item on the agenda is urgent business. Haven't been informed of any, there is none, so thank you all for your attendance. And I look forward to seeing you very shortly. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Half an hour.
Well, you can turn around.